So I'd like to call to order this regular council meeting of Monday, October the 22nd, 2018. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Administrator?
None from staff, Your Worship.
Council? Seeing none. Do we have any disclosure of interest? Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship, and it's probably of little consequence, really, but I still am a employee of the school district, and so on our letters to council, there was one from Elaine Holmes, number 12.
Okay.
So I guess if we do speak about that, I'll step out.
Okay, sounds good. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Your Worship. And item 10.2 is a correspondence item regarding an Agricultural Land Commission decision. If there is any discussion at the table with regards to that, I will step out as the owner of Cheap Garbage is also the owner of a company I do benefits for called SCV Contractors. So
Okay.
I will step out if that is discussed.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Cooper. I will step out on 22-1 hearings this evening, as I have in the whole process based on personal connections to the applicant.
Okay. Is there anything further? Hearing none. Administrator?
Your Worship, on to confirmation of minutes. Item 6.1 is the regular council minutes of October 9th. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Harrison, seconded by Councillor Wallace Richmond, that the regular council meeting minutes of October 9, 2018 be adopted as circulated.
Are there any questions or comments on these minutes? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
And under committee reports, item 7.1 is the Development and Planning Services Committee minutes of October 15th. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Flynn, seconded by Councillor Lavery, that the Development and Planning Services Committee meeting minutes of October 15th, 2018 be received as information.
Do we have any questions or comments? Hearing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
And item 7.2 is the Environmental Advisory Committee minutes of October 4th. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Lavery, seconded by Councillor Harrison, that the Environmental Advisory Committee meeting minutes of October 4, 2018 be received as information.
Okay. Do we have any comments on this or any questions? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
And Your Worship, under introduction of bylaws, item 8.1 is road closure bylaw number 4277. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Flynn, seconded by Councillor Wallace Richmond, that the bylaw entitled City of Salmon Arm Highway Closure Bylaw number 4277 be read a first, second, and third time.
Okay. Development Services?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a old municipal road that was dedicated back in 1953, and it's located directly east of the Ford dealership property. And to the east of the road is what was originally built as the Honda dealership, which is now a commercial building. And the aerial photo shows the building on 550 with the rooftop parking and service bays. But the owners of Ford would like to purchase this land that's dedicated as road from the city for $24,000. And they made an offer, and that was considered by council back in the summer, and council endorsed the offer. It was based on an appraisal, and the bylaw in front of you is for 3 readings, and if 3 readings are granted, then we will go through the public notification process of the community charter. And the applicants would like to basically own this land or this road. Right now it's used for parking, and they would just like to have ownership of it.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Harrison?
Thank you, Worship. Can we get the map? Is it possible to get Appendix 1 up just so everybody can see what piece of property we're talking about? Yeah, there it is. So I'll support the motion to go to public hearing. This piece of property owned by the city is of no use to the city, in any way that I can see. And for $24,000, that'll be an asset to us. So I'll support moving it forward.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any further questions or comments? Hearing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
Your worship, the next item under reconsideration of bylaws is permissive tax exemption bylaw number 4279. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Harrison, seconded by Councillor Lavery, that the bylaw entitled City of Salmon Arm 2019 Permissive Tax Exemption Bylaw number 4279 be read a final time.
Does the Chief Financial Officer want to just give us a quick rundown again?
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. This is a final reading that will grant permissive tax exemptions to 6 properties, 4 of which belong to the Churches of Salmon Arm Used Goods Society for the 4 vacant lots, 1 to the Shuswap Family Resource and Referral Society for their new location, and 1 to the Anglican Church of Canada as a result of an administrative requirement of BC assessment.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? Seeing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
Your worship, the next item 9.2 is OCP Amendment Bylaw 4286 for the property at 2690 Okanagan Avenue Southeast. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Flynn, seconded by Councillor Harrison, that the bylaw entitled City of Salmon Arm OCP Amendment Bylaw number 4286 be read a second time.
Development Services?
Your worship, there's 2 bylaws as part of this staff report, so I'll speak to the official community plan amendment first. And the OCP amendment proposed is to redesignate this 4.7 acre property formerly owned by the school district at the Shuswap Middle School from institutional to neighborhood commercial zone to support a new site-specific zone that would allow a new use called high technology research and development. And since first reading of this OCP bylaw and the related zoning bylaw, there's been some conversations with the applicant right up until an hour before this meeting. So I have some things to convey on that, and I'll talk about that with the rezoning bylaw.
Okay. So do we have any questions on the first part? Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think maybe my questions are probably better off in 9.3 now that I think about them. So maybe I'll wait for the further comments because I think you may answer some of them before I ask them.
Okay. Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm in support of moving the OCP piece forward. As the Director of Development Services mentioned, presently this property is designated as institutional because that's been its use for some time, and that clearly is not the right use for this property. I think many thought perhaps residential use may be a use that could be used here, but that is a piece of the high-tech research and development CD zone that's being discussed. And from my point of view, we really want to encourage this kind of development and business in our city. And I think the location is appropriate. So I will support moving forward the OCP plan amendment.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for letting me speak because I now remembered what I wanted to talk about. And it is kind of between OCP amendment and zoning. But I guess one of my concerns, or one of the things I want to see happen from this, I think the CD zone, which we'll talk about in a second, is the right way to go, comprehensive development zone. But I think long term, I think the applicant, one of the intentions of his work is to make sure that the message is loud and clear that we are high-tech friendly. And perhaps in the future OCP review, we need to discuss whether or not to have a special high-tech zone. And that's not to be dealt with today, but I just want to bring that forward, that future OCP discussions, I think this is a great solution, and that's why it's kind of more zoning for the future for this development to get it done on a timely manner, but I think in the big picture, a future OCP review, we need to talk about a special high-tech zone.
Thank you. Do we have anything further from council? Any comments? Okay. Hearing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
Your worship, now dealing with the associated zoning amendment bylaw 4287. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Lavery, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that the bylaw entitled City of Salmon Arm zoning amendment bylaw number 4287 be read a second time.
Development Services?
So, Your Worship, we can talk about the proposed CD19 Comprehensive Development Zone, which is what it's called at the moment. Section 57 is proposed. And on page 79 of your agenda, there's the proposed zone, the new use called High Technology Research and Development. The zone has been tailored specifically for this property in terms of how big it is and future subdivision potential. It also considers what the applicant wants in terms of accessory residential use on the property. And to apply this zone just anywhere in the city would be rather difficult. I think a zone like this could fit in the light industrial designated area of the city and possibly on some of the service commercial designated lands east of the city center. I think the proposed use, high technology research and development, could easily be inserted into some existing commercial zones, such as C3 and C2 and C6. In speaking with the applicant today and last week by email, the idea of, well, we'll talk about the name of the zone first. The applicant would like the name of the zone changed to High Technology Research and Development Commercial. And so if we did that, that would create a distinct commercial zone. And as I mentioned in this discussion at the beginning, it would be difficult to have that zone anywhere in the city. It fits on this property for sure. And changing the name of the zone to that for branding purposes, marketing, I don't think it would be the end of the world. So if council would like to do that, this is probably the time. The other thing, as I mentioned, we can do is add that use, high technology R&D, into a number of commercial zones and the light industrial zone and the general industrial zone. And we could create an offshoot derivative light industrial zone called high technology industrial zone. So as a matter of branding and marketing and putting Salmon Arm on the map as a high-tech R&D place, I mean, that type of conversation, that to mesh that with bylaw creation and the legalities of that, sometimes things don't fit perfectly that way, which is why we went the CD route. As far as fencing goes, in talking with the applicant, and he did send in an email to council, it's on your agenda, he does not really want to have barbed wire fencing if he doesn't need to, but if he needs barbed wire fencing, he would like that option. And he's constructed a fair amount of fencing on the property already and invested quite a bit of money into that. So on page 80 of your agenda, in red, section 57.10 is a regulation regarding barbed wire fencing. And as the direction I received from council, I was asked to come up with a regulation to address barbed wire fencing. And what I propose is no barbed wire fencing within the setback area of the property. So that's what is proposed. However, the applicant does not want to have that regulation in the zone, and he does not want to proceed with this bylaw amendment if that regulation is going to be in the zone.
I think the Councillor Eliason.
I just have a question for staff. So this, what I see on the screen, is the setback of where the fence could be? I'm just confused by 5 point.
The way that's written is there could be no barbed wire within the setback areas. So no barbed wire within 6 meters of the property line.
Okay, and currently, our bylaws, you can fence on the property line with barbed wire. Okay. Thanks, I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on that.
Just before we continue
I had a question related to.
okay, yeah, go ahead.
So since we had the discussion, I did go walk and check out the fence. That is a really good looking fence as far as fences go. Is the fence within the setbacks or is it outside?
It's within.
So the fence is built in the setbacks. So this would technically not allow any barbed wire. Okay, so I don't know if this is on the floor yet or if we're ready for discussion. But I'll wait till we finish talking about everything else because after walking the property, after talking to reading the email from the developer, and after really thinking about this a little more clearly and seeing what the fence looks like, my thought is different than it was at planning in previous discussions. So I hate to admit it, but I now agree with Councillor Elias.
Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Two things. First of all, I'd be interested in hearing from Mr. Boudreau just about the change in name to the CD zone and kind of his thoughts about it, if council agrees unanimously do that. And I'm alongside Councillor Flynn as well after walking that property. So I wanted to say those two things, and perhaps council would entertain Mr. Boudreau talking to us about the change in name proposal.
So is all council okay with that? Sure. Yeah, absolutely, come on up. And can somebody check, my screen is not on. Nothing at all, yeah.
Thank you
So welcome
for
to
inviting
council.
me to come up and speak, and thank you for going through the election and for serving our community. I've been involved with economic development since leaving Noon's Machine in 1999 in various forms, and our intention for this property is longer term. As far as this zoning application goes, it's not immediate. We wouldn't be looking to do all the things that we want to do on the property for at least 5 years if the economy and business holds together. So I felt the time was right, though, as we acquire and move into the property, to get a commercial high-tech zone established after having discussion with the planning folks here at the City Hall. And so spent the time to research zoning, high-tech zoning in other communities across Canada, along with Lana Fit from Economic Development, crafting what looked like a good amalgamation of those zoning bylaws and submitting those as an application. So the intention behind that was not to have a specific zone for this property, but to have the high-tech branding that's going to help economic development leverage what we already know is going on here. We've got more high-tech per capita than almost anywhere in the province here in Salmon Arm, but it's a well-hidden secret, and it's time to expose that secret, and having this type of zoning, I think, would help do that. So when city planning, the planning department came back and said, well, we'll do CD, I'm a busy guy, and I thought, oh yeah, okay, great. They're trying to make it work, which is awesome. But upon reflection, after the barbed wire issue came up, I thought, we're missing the boat here. The intention was to help economic development with branding, with this zoning. And I know the two aren't necessarily tied at the hip, but if we could make it easy to sell the high-tech story in Salmon Arm through this, I think it behooves us to do it.
Can I just ask a follow-up? Thanks, Mike, for that explanation. So I just want to specifically, basically what you're saying is add that word commercial onto the title of the zone, right?
I don't care if commercial's on there. I just want high tech on there.
Oh, okay,
So however whatever flavor of high tech
okay,
that flies, I'm pretty much fine with it.
okay.
But
All right, well, that's
CD
easy.
doesn't sell high tech to me,
Gotcha.
so.
Okay, well, I'm very comfortable with that. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Mike? Tim, did you wish to? No, I have a question for staff. Okay, you have a question? Okay, Councillor Flynn?
Not necessarily a question, you've clarified for me. I did want to say and I called you because your email had me confused, because I thought that the intent and what staff did, and as you said, it isn't wrong, was let's get a zone that works for you, and if it's a CD zone, we use them all the time, that's great. I now understand, and thank you for your input, because you're thinking much bigger. And because of that, I have some questions for staff, but I do thank you for making us aware of the fact that this isn't just about your piece of property. You're thinking for the good of the community. And I hate to use it, but I will. Small city, big ideas. Good job. That's what this is about. And I wasn't sure what your email meant. And now that you've clarified it, I completely understand and support and just want to figure out how we move it forward. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Boudreau? Councillor Jameson? Oh, not for Mr. Boudreau? Okay. All right, then go ahead and have a seat, and thank you for your explanation. We appreciate that. So I actually would like to see Mr. Lavery kind of push his button again first, and then Ken, and then Alan. Sorry. And then Councillor Jameson and Councillor Harrison. So, okay, Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Cooper. It's a question for staff, and Mike, thanks for the presentation here, and certainly this is, even when it was a CD application, it was also, the application also known as high-tech zone, so I'm really comfortable with that. My question, Your Worship, through you to staff, is the terminology that staff recommends we use at this stage. So we've got the CD proposal part, we've got your report indicates that you would be comfortable with some aspects of a change, but we've also just, for me anyhow, some new information that the word commercial doesn't have to be there. So I'm just, through you, Your Worship, asking for advice from staff about how this could be brokered.
Development Services?
Well, Your Worship, this has been an exercise in making regulations on the fly, and it's been rather fun. If we could go back a page. Oh, if we could get something on. Oh, no.
It's the same people who are running our voting booth.
Erin was so focused she didn't hear that.
No,
don't apologize.
I'm blaming engineering on this.
Okay.
Okay, so we started off the process with Section 57, CD 19, representing the 19th Comprehensive Development Zone in the city. So in talking with Mike, if we change scroll down a little bit, please, the other way. So if we change that to hang on a sec, Section 24, because there's 23 commercial zones right now. So we could change it to Section 24, C10, High Tech Research and Development Zone, C10. And then if this zoning follows through along with the OCP, that property would be zoned C10. It would be the only property in the city zone C10. We could also add the use high technology research and development to other commercial zones, such as C3 and C6. Could also add it to the light industrial zone and the general industrial zone. So it's the use, it's that new use in there. That's really the high technology use. And zoning is about land use.
And that's your recommendation?
I'm trying to appease the applicant here as best as I can, while keeping a zoning bylaw a zoning bylaw.
And through Your Worship, one last question. Are there any sort of unintended consequences of this that cause concern to you?
No, it's pretty simple. There's no unintended consequences I can think of.
Thank you.
Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship. So if I'm hearing correctly, then adding commercial is not necessary.
That's
And
what
the
I,
applicant is suggesting that it's not necessary at this time. And if we did, would we have to create a new list of permissible uses? Or would we default to what we already have in the other commercial zones? And it's really a moot point, because if it's not going to be applied, it doesn't matter. But maybe for our own interest and future zoning, if we do attach commercial, will we just default to what we already have in existence?
Mr. Pearson?
Your worship, the applicant wants this to be a commercial zone. He doesn't want it to be a CD zone.
But Your Worship, he's saying it's not necessary as far as the title of the zone.
As
Okay.
far as the title, that's right.
Okay. As far as the title of the zone, it's not necessary, but he would like permissible uses within that are commercial in nature.
He basically wants everything written in the zone on page 79 and 80 of the agenda. He wants everything in that zone to stay the same, with no restriction on barbed wire, or no regulation on barbed wire fencing.
Okay.
And the name of the zone changed.
Okay. I understand then. And the other questions answered some of my questions as well. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Harrison?
Thank you, Worship. So I would like to make an amendment based on the information that we've heard. And so we would replace Section 57 CD 19 Comprehensive Development Zone with Section 24-C10 High Technology Research and Development Zone.
Do we have a seconder? Everywhere. Councillor Eliason wanted to second that.
Okay. And just speaking to it, appreciate the input from Mr. Boudreau, and really appreciate the Director of Development Services allowing us flexibility and working through something that I think is better. I think it's an improvement. For right now, adding the use high technology research and development to C3, C6, and light industrial zones, I think it's a fantastic idea. It's not related to what we're talking about right this second, but I would love to see that as well. But I think the amendment makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, and I think I'm starting to understand this. I really appreciate the thought process, staff working on the fly. Just so I'm clear, based on the amendment, once it's voted on, we are creating a new C10 zone that does not exist. Nothing in the community besides this property is designated that if this gets approved. But we don't need to go through a whole OCP review to possibly designate other properties the same.
Well, that's a tough one, because we are changing the OCP on this property.
Okay.
And we're changing it to neighborhood commercial.
Okay. From institutional.
Right.
So that's an OCP change, and this is a zone. Okay, I think I understand it. But this would be the only property with a C10 designation at this point in the community.
Yes.
And any other C10 would allow the accessory residential use if we had other C10.
Right.
Perfect. So this achieves everything, including saying to the outside world, we're open for high-tech business, because that's what this C10 will be called, in a sense. So everybody's happy. Thank you.
I'm happy.
Okay.
That's the most important. You and Mr. Boudreau.
Councillor Eliason?
So this amendment with the name change, it doesn't include 57.10?
I guess the motion would have to be to amend section 57 and change that to section 24 and renumber the balance accordingly. 24.1, 24.2, 24.3, and also a decision has to be made on the fencing.
If we renumber it from 57 to 24, 57.10, which is outside storage and screening, the part that says no fencing consistent of barbed wire shall be located in the minimum setback area, and 57.9, is that included on the amended motion that we'd be voting on? Or is that excluded at this time?
There's been no motion made on the fencing.
Okay, so that's excluded. It's in red there because it's not included in what we're discussing right now if it was to go to vote. Okay, so it's not included. I just wanted to be clear on that. I think what we're talking about is 6-1, half dozen to the other. I think the intended outcome is similar no matter what we do. If we created a CD zone or a C10 zone, it's permitted uses within that. My question is on the page above, which is 57.3, is does this allow for sales of anything? Or is that implied with those 10 uses under 57.3? Like, can they sell product from this of any sort? Say they were incubating or doing something or had a product to sell from there. Would a commercial operation, which I would assume you'd be generating something for sale, is that just implied?
It is implied, and it's allowed under the 57.3.1, under the new definition.
Of high technology
Yeah.
and research and development, which would include implied sales. Okay, I'm happy with this amendment to the original motion. I think that, like you said, it's 6-1, half dozen the other. Councillor Flynn has mentioned that, and I wouldn't support it if it included the red writing on the next page, because I don't think it's fair, and I don't think we do it to other businesses no matter where they're located. So I'll support this amendment.
So if we don't want that, the red writing on the next page to be on there, do we need to take it out at this time, or should we make another amendment, or an amendment to the amendment?
I'd have to refer to administration for that question.
Administrator, what would be your
Your
recommendation?
worship, the fencing is not included at this point, so you don't have to do anything
Oh, okay.
unless you want to include it.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship, and just speaking in favor of the amendment here, because this is an amendment that will benefit the applicant, but I appreciate his efforts to make sure that it's going to benefit those that come after, because it's something new, and I appreciate also Mr. Pearson's comments that it's planning on the fly and he's having fun, because it's new for Salmon Arm, and so it speaks to the changing nature of our economy here, and regionally and globally. So part of that branding that we've been talking about quite a bit over the last few weeks, and I know it's been going on for a year or more, but I will certainly support that. And it'll set this young industry in Salmon Arm up for more investment and more development. So I thank the applicant and certainly staff for working together on this.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Wallace-Richmond?
Thanks, Your Worship. I think it's an important signal, and I'm happy to support it. I do have a question for the Director of Development and a question for our CFO. So this isn't, I just want to clarify, it's not mutually exclusive. You don't have to have this to be doing this kind of work if you're already in an existing business with in a different zone. Because there are other companies who are indeed doing high-tech research and development.
Yeah, I could put it another way. If this business was in the industrial park under light industrial
Yes.
zoning, there'd be no zoning change needed.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear that it wasn't mutually exclusive to other existing zones. And then for the CFO, does this change anything in terms of assessment or BC assessment or anything like that? Or do they all fall under the same kind of taxation?
I think I would have to confirm with BC Assessment, but I'm not sure if they take our zoning into consideration when they assess the values.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison?
I'll pass, I think, Your Worship. I think at this
got
point
it.
that'd be most prudent.
Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, I think I will pass. I was just going to comment that I'm in favor of the amendment, and then we can vote on the amended motion, and then I'll comment.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm also in favor of this amendment. I think it does reflect what we are now becoming more and more, a high-tech community. So I will call the motion on the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And then the motion as amended, Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Worship. And I know at planning, we had discussed and voted on, and I think the vote was 4-3, on whether or not to put that red stuff in. I was one of those in favor. And as I've said, after walking the site, seeing the fence that's there, I think my vision of a chain link fence was a combination of what you might see in a farmer's field where it's the barbed wire fence from the bottom up. This is a chain link fence that looks very good, and the applicant does not want to put barbed wire at the top like we have around our public works yard unless he has to. And if he does have to, that would be sad, but for security purposes, that may happen in the future. But I now, after seeing the fence, how it looks and how it surrounds the property in an appropriate manner, if it had to have chain link at the top, or sorry, barbed wire at the top, I would allow that. So I'm not going to put anything in writing that says that can't happen. And yes, I changed my mind, but thank you for those who voted the other way, and I now see that it wasn't necessarily appropriate to put that restriction.
Thank you. So that, what's in red is not actually in there. It's just a proposal, right?
That's correct.
That's correct, okay, so we don't have to do anything about that. Okay, do we have anything further then from council? Councillor Eliason?
Yeah, thanks. The motion as amended, I think, is going to work. Thanks, everyone, for letting me lecture you at planning, because I thought it was pretty fun, but a good exercise in democratic process. So we've recently come to know that Salmon Arm is a high-tech hotbed and high-tech industry. And recently we've seen sort of this boil to the surface with the Innovation Center and now this new zoning and this growing business. So I'd like to thank staff for what they've done with being resourceful, and just the fact that we have CD zoning, or in this case now a C10 zoning, show how nimble and how flexible local government is to make changes for people to open up businesses here. So I think that just the CD zoning in itself is a reflection of that, and thank staff for working with the applicant, and thank the applicant for working with staff to make this happen. I think that we've done a good thing here, and I think it's the least we can do to encourage business within our community. So I will support this motion as amended, and I'm glad that we're no longer considering the barbed wire.
Okay, do we have anything further? Hearing none, then I will call the question on the motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to staff, too. Thank you. Administrator?
Your Worship, the next item, 9.4, is Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4288. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Jameson, seconded by Councillor Wallace Richmond, that the bylaw entitled City of Salmon Arm 2018 to 2022 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4288 be read at final time.
Okay. Just a quick rundown, Chief of Financial Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. This final reading will amend the 2018 to 2022 financial plan bylaw for council resolutions made thus far and to redirect allocations between budget accounts.
Okay. Do we have any questions? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
Your Worship, that brings us to item 10, correspondence.
Okay. Councillor Eliason?
Hi, Your Worship. I'm going to take a crack at correspondence today like you guys haven't seen me ever do before. I'm going to speak about as many as I can before you cut me off. So items 1, 6, and 9, I would like to refer to the Traffic Safety Committee. One is a letter from Mr. Keskinen, the other one's from Mr. Zorn, and the other one is from our friends at the bottom of Shoemaker Hill. And I'd like to refer those to Traffic and Safety before we discuss them here so that they can come up with their recommendations. So would you require a motion for that?
Administrator?
No.
Okay. That's the first thing I'd like to do. Number 11, which is a letter from Ms. Norrish about the trail rider, I'd like to refer that to the engineering department to see if they can find a solution with the rowing and paddling club in canoe, because I believe that's where they want to be.
Director of Engineering?
Your Worship, we have made the recommendation already, so I'm not sure where that's sitting with the rowing paddling club.
Okay, and I would request that staff follows up on that then, just to give us an update at our next meeting, if that's possible.
Councillor Wallace Richmond, did you have a question?
Yeah, if I could just, so the rowing and paddling has met with Adaptive Trail and had potentially a solution to the problem, but there still is not sufficient space. So it does, I agree that it should go back to staff for how we can get some more space generally in that, at that part of the beach.
So Director of Engineering, you'll follow up with them and let us know?
Well, Your Worship, it really boils down to finding space at Canoe Beach, and I don't think we have any space at Canoe Beach for that sort of storage area. We don't have any lease area left, and the logical spot would be to negotiate something with the Rowing and Paddling Club, in my opinion.
Okay, so maybe you can still follow up and let us know? See where they're at?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sharing is caring, and I believe that's ours, and we let them lease it, so that would be awesome if they would let other people share in their ability to use our spaces there. Number 10, it's a letter about Christmas lights. I'd like.
Hold on just a second. Some of the people want to speak to that.
Oh,
Councillor Harrison?
Thanks. We've stopped the clock on you, so you're good. Okay. Just regarding the Shuswap Trail Rider adaptive equipment, I think staff has done their piece there. I would suggest that Councillor Wallace Richmond get together with those two groups, and because I think it's at our table now. And I just chatted with her. She agreed to do that. I think she'd be a very good person to do it. So if she's willing, perhaps we should pass it that way.
Okay, thank you. You're okay with that?
Yeah, and maybe have the parties meet here with a member of, have the parties meet here at the city with a member of staff so that we
Sorry,
can.
do you want to? Okay.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Have the parties meet here with a member of staff so that we can have the greater conversation about that area of the beach as a whole.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Perfect.
Sorry. Councillor Harrison, and then you can.
Appreciate Councillor Wallace Richmond taking that on, and I'm not suggesting that she's going to be able to come up with a solution necessarily, but what we're asking her to do is to try to come up with a solution and then come back to us. So appreciate her willingness.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, I was gonna suggest that I don't expect Councillor Wallace Richmond and one staff person to solve it. But I think dialogue and a discussion, because I think that happened already and we thought we had the solution, and apparently now the solution doesn't work for one of the groups. And I think the reality is there isn't a lot of land there, and they may have to compromise, because I think the end result will be working together and compromising, and that may be what everybody has to accept. So I think if anybody can do that, it isn't me, it's Councillor Wallace Richmond, so I'm very comfortable with her managing that process.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Wallace Richmond, for agreeing to that. Councillor Lyson?
if only we had some vacant lease lots where we might be able to put a C-can if all else doesn't work out. Which takes me on to number 11, which is Christmas lights. These folks don't seem to recognize the fact of the area of the Downtown Improvement Association area, and wondering why they don't have Christmas lights. I was wondering if we can have staff write them a response letter with that outline and why there's no, the explanation of the Christmas lights function ran by the DIA and that they're not in the DIA. So I'd request that staff sends a letter to the Clarks about Christmas lighting on BDF.
Okay.
And number 13, I would refer to staff as well, which is the sidewalk across First, the south side, that they want to be repaired. I guess that would go to our safety committee, and I'm sure staff can handle that if they need any further direction. And number 14, which is the Citizens on Patrol, they're asking for grants and aids, and I believe that's coming up after the budget or before the budget, but that's done through the Shuswap Community Foundation, I believe.
That's right.
And so we don't necessarily have to do anything about that. And last but not least, painting by Jan's Tunnel. The students, it'd be a student initiative. So that's number 12. And I would request a presentation from the students with the plan about how to paint the tunnel. and the presentation of a budget. And with that, I would be looking to, at that time, spend money from 2018-19 council initiatives, if we can get it in this year, to spend that money so the tunnel is painted. So I would request staff reach out to Elaine Holmes and ask for a student presentation on how they'd like to paint the tunnel, and then I think that we would give them money.
Okay.
That's all I got.
You want to speak to that one, Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, just that last item. I guess I'm concerned about pre-spending council initiatives. I would prefer it be referred to the find out what it costs and put it in the budget process. And if it's not, it's part of the regular budget process, then we can deal with it as council initiatives. But I don't want to say where we're going to pay for that yet, but I think it should be part of the budget discussions. That's my thought. Yeah.
Okay. So everybody's okay with that? We'll have a presentation and then we'll decide? Okay, sounds good. Wow, okay. Does anybody else have letters they'd like to speak to? Okay. Councillor Wallace Richmond?
Thank you. Item 19, which is a letter from, Minister Shane Simpson, Social Development and Poverty Reduction, following up from our meeting at UBCM, specifically an outreach worker, but a virtual outreach worker. So looking for direction on how we might speak to the staff member to whom he refers and follow up with our partner agencies.
So you want a staff member first?
I'm at a loss how I would do that. Well, no, I just, through
wants to
the
know.
letter, I want to be able to share this information with social impact so that they can reach out to this person, and so we just
Yeah, I don't think that's a
there
problem.
for the,
I think we can share this letter with them with no problem.
okay, perfect.
That should be okay, shouldn't it, corporate officer? Yeah, okay, no worries. It's a good idea. Councillor Flynn?
Item 18. So again, recognizing all the work being done by staff and council with senior levels of government, we talked to the minister about the Highway 97B and 10th Avenue intersection. We also talked about the project west of town. Does staff have, this doesn't really talk about any progress on either or any updates, but I do understand after our meeting at UBCM that the preload for the west of town project was put to bid, and I think it closes this week or closed last week. Do we have any updates on either major project beyond this relatively vague letter?
Director of Engineering?
Your Worship, I have been in communication with Dan Bella, the project manager for TCH West. He's going to contact me as soon as the tender closes and give me sort of an overview of what the results are. That doesn't mean it'll be awarded right away, but the anticipation is that they will get started on it. There's also, as part of that, there's the upgrade for the water main along between 1st and 10th. So we're going to be in discussion with them on that. So as far as 10th and 97B, I have not heard yet any plans for that. So
They did put a couple speed sign when you're coming north.
So I can
That's
update on that one because I received a very a message from a person who was very upset because a child had she'd almost seen a child hit there. And so I went, I listened to her message, tried to call her back, but she was unavailable right away. So I went to Minister of Transportation here and talked to them, and then went up to the RCMP and talked to them, and then called our MLA, Greg Kylo. And a couple days later, Mr. Kylo phoned me and said that he had talked to them down there, and that they were he had asked them to put in a speed reader board, a temporary solution, something temporary that would slow traffic down. So they more school signs and a temporary reader board, at which they did, and saw it. It was only he called me on a Friday, said that he had talked to them. Our MLA did, And on Tuesday, late Tuesday afternoon of that week, it was installed. So I had talked to the person in between who had left me the message, and she was still very upset at first. And then when she heard that there was something being done, she was feeling much better. But that'll only be there apparently until they've come up with a permanent solution.
So thank you for that update from both of you. I think it's really important to note that those speed reader signs are great, but the speed limit isn't any slower. And obviously the temporary solution is better than nothing. I think it's awesome. I've seen it a number of times. But if you're doing 85 or 90, you're under the speed limit that's posted there. So I think it's really important that we continue on that initiative as a council, and I think that's all we need to say now.
I think it says 50 when children are on the highway as part of the speed reader board. It says on the sign, it says, yeah.
What's that?
So so they did have that piece on it as well. If you look at this. But yes, it's only temporary, but they wanted to do something, have something at least there. So, yeah. Councillor Jameson, did you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And yeah, the speed limit sign that they have up or clocking speed as you approach the intersection is a good first step. And I know we've had some back and forths on email regarding that. I think education is really needed here because the school, that's what kind of coalesced all the opinion at this intersection, as well as the industrialization of that intersection, is because we've well, we're going to read about this later, about the ALC decision on that property. But if 10th is industrialized as planned in the coming years, we have a school that's probably going to grow in enrollment. It's going to be a hot spot, and we're going to have to deal with it hopefully sooner than later. So the sign is a good first step, but I really think an RCMP blitz, part of an education program there, is important. And I think the school district has to be involved in some way as well, because if I'm not mistaken, few, if any, children are being bused to that school. They're all driven by parents. So that's increased the volume of traffic there considerably.
Well, thank you for that, I agree. And I did talk to the RCMP, as I said, about it as well. So, but maybe we can encourage them to have a bit of a blitz there. So, Councillor Lassen, did you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, so I think we can, what we have right now is a good short-term measure, and I'm glad that our MLA was able to get that done so quickly. Here's our next step, guys. Do nothing. We are waiting for the report to come back from the Ministry of Transportation engineers to tell us what they think is best for that intersection. And as soon as that report comes back, staff will let us know. If we agree with it, then it's either, and it's a major improvement, like Councillor Jameson said, then it's time for us to buck up and pay for a share possibly for that, along with the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Transportation. If their suggestions aren't what we think is enough, then it's time for us to raise a stink and take that out and say this isn't acceptable. So we've done, I think, a really good job up to this point. And as soon as we hear back about the report with the recommendations, that's when we get to go to that next level, because that's what we prepped both Minister of Education and Minister of Transportation for at UBCM, and their staff are working on it, and they were already proactive enough before UBCM to take that in. So they started the report in September after school had gone in, and they're going to get back to us soon. So I will wait for that, and once we get that, then we'll take the next step as a council, I think.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walsh-Richmond, did you wish to speak to that?
Not on this topic.
Okay. Did anyone else want to speak on this topic?
One more comment.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Councillor Jameson.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship, and good comments, Councillor Eliason. Was we're already on the ball, so I mean it's coming, and it's just that the board itself is a good first step. Improvements are needed, probably needed long ago, but it's going to be a coordination of the city, the police, the school district, and the whole Ballywalk. So we're gonna, it'll be good to follow that. The other little notice that's I think what we should notice is, if I'm not mistaken, we do have some reserve in some money for improvement at Canoe. Now I would be that doesn't seem to be happening. And if I'm not mistaken, the reserve is somewhere around $75,000. And we've been waiting for quite a while to spend that money, and it was going to be a three-way partnership to improve that intersection. I would suggest if council of the day decides to do some improvements there, we might have $70,000 that could be spent. And I would urge the future councils to spend that appropriately at a good site where it's going to improve safety.
I think that we had also put, when we sent the letter, when Jennifer Wilson sent the letter, she had said something about we have 20,000 that we could use or something like that as well. Engineering?
Your worship, we didn't install any crosswalk signalization this year, so we could use that funding. We offered that funding up as well. And it was around 36,000 for the improvement at Canoe that's still on the books.
Right, okay.
Thanks for that.
Thank you so much. Is there anything further on the correspondence then? Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Item 17 is a letter from another minister, Bruce Ralston, saying that he would like us to get in touch with him to invite him to the opening of the Innovation Center. So can we just make sure that that gets sent along to our EDS team, which is very exciting.
Right, it's very exciting. So do we have anything further on the correspondence that we'd like to speak to? Hearing none. I just want to encourage us too to actually add to this new electronic system a pause queue. Because if somebody is like on number 4 and they want to speak to number 1, I have to shut everybody else off so that that one can go forward. And then they all have to push the button again to be able to speak to something. So that's where I think we really want to work with the technicians and see if we can get a pause queue on here like we had on our former system. It was more archaic, but in some ways, in this way, it was actually a little bit more user-friendly. So just encourage that, because especially in the correspondence, we end up going back and forth quite a bit here. So I appreciate that. Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, just item 3, has that been reviewed and looked at by staff? It's fairly detailed, lots of photos, lots of concerns about things that have happened in the past, and I'm just wondering, it has flooded 3 times in 15, 20, 25 years, but fairly seriously, is there anything being done to improve that area at this point, or are we waiting for future development?
Director of Engineering?
Thank you, Your Worship. Essentially, this is a known area of concern, but again, when this happened, it was on September 16th, and we had probably a 1 in 50 year rain event. So if you look at the stats, you'll see that it was an incredible rain. We had flooding all over the community. Not to say that we're taking any attention away from this particular location, but the ditch is now raw as well, because it flows through. So we have difficulty in cleaning that ditch out when we want to. We need to go through the proper processes. So we are working on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you're aware, working on it, and there may be future budget requests to try to make it better. But we can't really do much without fisheries.
Your Worship, we'll probably be adding some additional budget to our storm drainage accounts this year to address some of these ditching issues, similar to last year.
Okay, thank you.
Did we let these people know?
We've had communication with them, but we'll follow up after this letter's gone through from councils.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anything further on correspondence? Okay, hearing none. Administrator?
Your Worship, there was item 10.2, ALC application 375.
That's you.
Is there going to be comments?
Yep. You said yeah.
Yeah. Step out while you guys talk.
So comments on this? Councillor Jameson?
I think you're going to know what my comments are. I supported our AAC on this application. It wasn't really close, but we had a really robust discussion about this, and I alluded to it earlier in my comments about the that intersection there, because This was the beginning, or it appeared to be the beginning of the industrialization of that strip of 10th. And I know that intersection well, and we said from the start, as a majority on the committee, that that is not an appropriate use of that land. And I'm glad that the ALC agrees. The other side of it, however, is we need this enterprise in town. We need cheap garbage to be able to do their business, because they are an important part of what we do here for waste management and removal. So we're kind of in a spot here. They're in a very difficult spot. So I urge this council and the next to help Cheap in their seeking out a new piece of property so they can continue their service, because it's valuable. I think one of the dangers we have is when we speak out, or as a ALC, as they speak out against the use of land, it not be misconstrued as speaking out against the business that is conducting their affairs there, because like I said, it's a valuable business and we want them in the community. In my opinion, I think the ALC did a good job here.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you to Councillor Jameson for his comments, because I agree about the cheap garbage industry and wanting to have them in Salmon Arm. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the response from the ALC, because it was quite interesting. I think as a council, we decided that we wanted to see whether the ALC's position was the same as it might have been in 2002. And their response was interesting, because the first piece on the first paragraph on page 114 said the commission would likely have no objection to their designation as industrial, because the adjoining lots to the west in the ALR are designated for industrial purposes and supported by the commission for these uses. The word likely is interesting there, because below that in number 10, the city redesignated the property to industrial based on the April 23rd, 2002 letter, without seeking a resolution of the commission to confirm its stance on the industrial designation of the area, including the property. And this is not a fault of council, because if you read that quote, you might think it would be an automatic. But if you go over to page 115, number 15, says the executive committee, which is a committee that looked at this application, reviewed the history of the commission's review of OCP designation in the surrounding areas and as it applies to the property. While the property is currently designated as industrial in the OCP, it restates the redesignation was made without the endorsement of a resolution of the commission, and as such, the industrial designation is not a consideration of the executive committee's review. And then on number 16, and I think this is what Councillor Jameson was talking about, the last sentence says, the executive committee therefore finds that there are available industrial lands in the area endorsed by the commission for industrial use and exclusion. Prior to considering lands outside the endorsed SDA for industrial use and exclusion, the executive committee expects that the existing endorsed area should be excluded and developed for industrial use. So the ALC, I think, has taken a really close look at this application as we asked them to, and they have said no. So what I would say is, as a city councillor, thank you for that answer. Yes, I think if there's any way we can help Cheap Garbage find a piece of zoned land that isn't zoned industrial, that would be great. But I don't think continuing to push this particular piece of land would be productive for Cheap Garbage, for the city, or for the ALC. So I don't recommend doing that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eliason?
I was going to say the exact same thing as Councillor Harrison. Exactly the same words. I'm kidding. I thought this report was really an excellent report, because it gave us the background. It drew the lines in the sand, said do this first, maybe in the future we could possibly look at this property, but it was a very clear, well-researched, well-read, or well-written report, and it gave us good reasons. So at this time, I would respect it and wish the applicants luck with another property as is directed by the ALC.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jameson?
Thanks for a second opportunity. And one of the things that the AAC and certainly the council has asked for certainly over the last probably half a dozen applications is that members of the ALC come to Salmon Arm and walk property, and they did that here. They had an on-the-ground look at the property, and I think that's a really important step for them to do, because that wasn't always the case. It's really important that they come and see what these applications are about, and I hope that our urging that we had a few months ago had something to do with that. The last thing I'll say, I should have said it before, if an OCP review is coming, this is going to be, I think, a really important area of Salmon Arm to be discussed. Okay, and because I don't think that our appreciation of agricultural land is the same in 2018 as it was in the 90s.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lavery. You'll have to push a button again. I was a little too enthusiastic here. There you go.
Yes, thanks, Mike Cooper. I think staff would do this automatically, but just to ensure, could we refer this to Economic Development Society and Lana as well, just so it goes onto their agenda as I'll bring it up myself with them, but just to shoot that report to them. And I concur with the comments that we've had here. I think it's the key thing right now. We have clarity. That's what we asked for, and we received it, especially for adjoining pieces of property, and to work with a committed business owner who wants to stay here and to see what we can help with. So if staff could do that, I guess maybe it's a question, Your Worship, through you. Do we automatically refer ALC decisions to EDS?
No, Your Worship, no, that's not standard practice.
But we can do
Plus,
that.
we can certainly do it with this one.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Council, for all that discussion on that. Are we finished now? You can ask Councillor Flynn to come back in.
Sure.
That's further to this. Councillor Lavery?
Yes, Your Worship. I just, I know we have it's item number 18 on our list, but Nisconnet has been sitting here quite a while here in terms of the Wildfire Protection Initiative, and I was wondering if the will of council would be that we could deal with that before we go to staff reports.
Council, are you all, you're fine with it? So can we move that one forward? Okay, certainly. Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, before we talk about that, I just want to check with staff. One of the people speaking is a client, his business is a client of mine, but he's not speaking with regards to any decisions on his business. It's just the big picture wildfire initiative. Am I okay to stay for that discussion?
Administrator?
Yes, provided it remains on the big picture, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. So did we want to ask them to come forward and speak to us on this, and then what would be the procedure here, because we don't have this motion on the floor yet? Any comments, Administrator?
Your Worship, I think perhaps Councillor Lavery would like to say a few words about the topic, and we would be looking for a motion eventually.
Okay. Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And if we could sort of get the, thank you very much. I'm just looking for it myself here. And Your Worship, I think I'm going, with your indulgence, take a few minutes here, maybe a little bit longer than my allotted time, because things have been changing as they will. And I'd leave it up to Councillor Flynn. I think there is a degree of business involvement here, but maybe if that crops up, that you can make those decisions. I want to just recognize, just to start off with, a few key people involved. The Scotland Indian Band, Shane Vincenzi with the Skitsine Resources. In the last few weeks, we've been working very hard to put this proposal in front of you right now. Terry Smith, who actually is of Silvatech, who is a partner in the proposal that's coming up. I'd like to also recognize our Chief Financial Officer, who has really been instrumental in helping us navigate the parameters of what a government-to-government proposal would be and how that flanges in with procurement processes we have within the city, and I'll talk about that in a second. And our Chief Executive, our Administrative Officer as well, Carl, I just want to thank you for brokering the concerns and the ideas to move this forward in something that's very a practical application, an important application, and even more importantly, an opportunity for a government-to-government procedure going forward. So that's the context of my comments here now, Your Worship. We have a very tight timeline for doing this. What I'm going to say here now is our meeting was just a few days ago to try to get a handle on the shifting context of what's going on. So a quick brief history. In May, this council, and it's reflected in this document here, agreed to consider a co-application on a government-to-government intent for what was a wildfire program that didn't exist. We were in between the old one and what we were anticipating in the new one. At UBCM, as we know, and man, it's just a few weeks ago, and it seems like a long time ago right now that we were there, but the government announced a new approach to funding. It was a split. They've retained they announced the Community Resilience Investment Program, which is essentially focused on activities within the corporate boundaries. And they have retained the other program, which was, they've adjusted the other program, but it's mainly Crown land outside our civic boundaries. The previous swipey, and was one of the reasons we were resistant to getting involved with it, meant that we were responsible as well for the outside stuff. But the new announcement at UBCM separates these two out. CRIP, which is in front of us, is 100% funded, as they say up to 100%, but our understanding it's 100% funded, and it's based on fire smart principles within the corporate boundary. And I always have trouble with I have to just check here for an acronym. The Forest Enhancement Society has also, based on the UBCM announcement, will be for solely, again, those Crown lands outside the corporate boundary. We originally thought a few weeks ago, and the advice is that given the situation of Nisconluth and Salmon Arm, that there would be individual applications. That was the initial word out of UBCM, that it would be good to stack them together and then submit them. We have, and again, just this is fairly fresh information and from Terry, but the feedback coming now from the province is that it is okay to actually co-apply. That's different from a few weeks ago, and have essentially a regional CRIP application. Again, we're talking days old information and trying best how to deal with this. So the options in the current thinking, and I'll talk about government to government in a second, is that the Nisconluth Indian Band, through their Skacheen Resource Development, put forward a regional CRIP application that would be one for Salmon Arm and there'd be one for Nisconluth, that each entity would look after the if the funding was successful, would look after the allocation and the spending within their own jurisdiction. That's number one. In Salmon Arm, it's likely that what we would do, and there'd be more to be determined, but step number one would be to come up with a wildfire protection plan as a basis to prioritize where we have to go. If we got $100,000, somewhere between $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 would be up in that plan. The rest of it would be used for a range of fire smart activities, ranging from education, planning, and even vegetation management in year one. That's what the CRIP part of it is right now. The second part of it that wasn't in discussion actively a couple of weeks ago, and it has been proposed from Nisconluth, and I personally think it's a good idea, and I'll speak to it. Well, by speaking to it, I'm in favor of it, is to also apply for a Forest Enhancement Service funding. That would go over a couple of years. That could involve several $1 million. That would be funded by the province to deal with those crown lands that are contiguous to our corporate boundary or reserve boundary. And that they are separate applications. One does not denigrate from the success of the other applications, but at this stage right now, some of the feedback in the channel loop that we're getting is it's important and would be looked on favorably to apply to both. So, part one, CRIP, co-application through Nisconlith, separate allocation if it's approved. Part two would be the larger piece for the crown lands that would be determined and allocated according to essentially our proportionate share of crown land that's in our jurisdictions. I support that. I do want to actually, Your Worship, and I'll wrap up here very quickly, I just checked the wording of the therefore part of it with the Chief Administrative Officer, because I think I might have a slightly different version, but I'll do that in a second. But I do want to say I want to talk to the government opportunity here. And it's certainly my intent, and I would urge this table's intent to proceed with this. I think it's fair to say from the corporate side of things, we don't have a lot of experience with this. And some of the, there are some very appropriate and reasonable concerns about procurement, especially procurement down the line. We've voiced those with Nisconlith. Nisconlith has recognized those, but I think that they can be handled as we develop and look for, and best practice does exist out there about government-to-government applications and procurement processes and what that means. I would see that happening as the application goes in. That's job number one right now, and then job number two is to work on that so that both entities can be comfortable with and clear and transparent about how we go forward. I think it's probably good for Nisconlith as well as they develop language with other, perhaps with other local governments down the line. So I'm going on here right now, but I really urge us to accept the intent of this, to seize the opportunity. We can do it. There's a little bit of lack of clarity into government-to-government language of what that means for us, but I think that we can develop that as well, but to proceed with the application. And my last comment, Your Worship, through you, is just to clarify with our CAO. I think I might have a slightly old version, and if I have it, maybe others have it here too. The first sentence in the therefore be it resolved, if that could be read out. Oh, sorry. On me or on here? Right. Well, okay, sorry. Okay, so sorry. Somehow I have a different version of that. So that therefore it be resolved that Council accept the proposal from the Nisconlith Indian Band to prepare pro bono an application, and maybe this is the role of the Chief Administrative Officer to read this out, I'm not sure. Yes. I just want to make sure that it is say Nisconlith Indian Band and their Resource Development Corporation.
Do you wish to move that, Councillor Lavery?
I would pleased, excited, and emphatically move it.
Okay. And seconded by Councillor Jameson. Pleased, excited, and emphatically. Emphatically. Okay, seconded. Did you want to read out the motion? Chief Administrative Officer. It's long.
Your Worship, it was moved by Councillor Lavery. I'm not sure who the seconder was.
Councillor Jameson.
Okay. I'll just read the motion. It's whereas the city of Salmon Arm and neighboring lands have been and are vulnerable to the threat of wildfire, and whereas Council recognizes the importance of mitigating these effects where possible, and whereas local governments and First Nations are increasingly working together to address common interests, challenges, and mutual opportunities for their communities, and whereas at the May 14th, 2018 regular meeting of council, council resolved to proceed with an application for provincial funding for wildfire risk reduction and prevention in a joint application with the Nisconnet Indian Band as follows. That council directs staff to move forward with option 1 as outlined in the staff report dated May 1st, 2018, and that associated costs of data collection and or preparation of an application for provincial funding be shared with the Nisconnet Indian Band, and further that council authorize the sole sourcing of these works and services to Silvertech Consulting Limited. And whereas such a model / partnership may lead to partnerships with other First Nations and neighboring communities, therefore be it resolved that council accept the proposal from the Nisconnet Indian Band to prepare a pro bono an application under the Community Resilience Investment Program on behalf of the city, and that NIB will serve as the first step in a community-to-community approach for addressing wildfire risks, and that council authorized the use of $15,000, which was allocated in the 2018 budget for the purpose of undertaking a wildfire mitigation initiative to cover any necessary expenses related to a CRI and or Forest Enhancement Society of BC application, and any next steps that may be required from either the CRI or FESBC programs, and further that any resulting work or contracts which may arise from a successful application, other than that which is considered community to community, will be administered / awarded in accordance with the city's procurement process and program guidelines if applicable.
Okay. So, speaking to the motion, Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I sat in to hear where this was going. When I read the motion or listen to the motion, there's no question in my mind that perhaps down the road, my client could have significant financial positive results. But at this point, I feel that the overall importance of this initiative, I'm just going to speak to the fact that through the election campaign, many people talked about fire preparedness, our surrounding lands and lands in Salmon Arm. So I think we need to do something, but I think with specific reference to a client of mine, as important as I feel this may be, and even though they're doing pro bono initially, I think I feel better stepping out. I appreciate all the work that's being done. I shouldn't speak to it anymore, but when my client is specifically referenced, I think it's best I step up. So,
thank you, I appreciate that. So speaking to the motion, Councillor Jameson.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks to Councillor Lavery for this strong finish in the last few weeks, because it's been a fluid process. I remember the first couple of meetings we had at A&W, and when I left the meetings with these two gentlemen here, I was what's coming? Because we were kind of in the end game of some old programs and the beginning of something new that nobody knew anything about. For me, there's two things that are most important here. It's the government to government that comes along with the intent to help each other here, and the trust that's built into this motion. I really appreciate that. I really do, because in my time at this table, I don't remember the city of Salmon Arm handing over a file to another government and saying, you know what, we trust you to look after this to a certain degree, because that's what we're doing. And I really appreciate that, because I think that shows trust on both of our parts, both of our communities, recognizing that we're one community. And when it comes to fires, we have to help each other out here. So I really appreciate the people that have worked on this, but Councillor Lavery, you're running with it like you have over the last few weeks, especially as things changed and came about so quickly. I appreciate that, so good work.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, my thanks to Councillor Lavery as well. And I just have a couple of questions for him, or perhaps Terry. And I know that you've talked through this, and it seems like the granting application process is kind of evolving from the province even. So we want to make sure that whatever we do, it provides us with the very best chance of getting the monies that's needed for this. And so I heard Councillor Lavery, I heard you say that co-application, now, even though the original or the second phase said don't co-applicate, so you're 100% confident that that is not going to jeopardize our or the Nisconlith Indian Band's application?
Councillor Lavery?
At some point, thank you, a great question, and maybe perhaps with the will of council, Terry could talk to this as well, but the feedback loop that we're getting through Terry is that co-application would presumably increase our chances, and that's as confident as I can say.
Did we want to ask Mr. Smith to speak to it? Yeah, would you like to come up and speak to it? Mr. I was thinking Mr. Smith.
I'm Terry Smith and working with the Nisconlith Band. Originally, when these came out, when the first program was re-announced in September, there was some uncertainty about co-applying for these programs. After that, I spoke with the head of the CRI program, Peter Ronald, and he said he had, in fact, he phoned me and said he had just been to training and meetings and whatnot, and they're strongly encouraging regional applications, which is more than one community applying together, probably because it's less administration for them. Maybe they get more work done that way, I'm not sure. But that was the latest that I got from them about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Do we have questions for Mr. Smith?
I have one other question.
Okay, you want to push a button?
So thank you, Terry, for that. And I mean, the whole George Abbott report talked about cooperation between our governments, side-by-side governments. And so it seemed like such a surprise when it came out that, oh no, now you don't co-applicate, you do it on your own. So I'm really pleased to hear that, and I appreciate that message, and I think I totally support that idea. It seemed to me contrary to everything that we should apply separately. The other question, and I don't know if it's for Terry or for Councillor Lavery, is about the applying for both. I know the deadline, I think, is November 30th for one and December 7th for the other. Could you comment perhaps on that? I just know how, well, we all know how granting works, and it's a bit of a game, and you want to get it right, so.
Sure. So there are two programs. These programs are intended to work together. They're all in cooperation with Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations. And there's a third one called Finesse, which is strictly for First Nations on their reserves. But the original funding last year for Swipey was in the municipal boundaries, but up to a 2-kilometer swath around the city. What they changed this year was they made the CRIP, which replaced Swipey, being only within the community boundaries, and really nothing outside of the community boundaries unless there's a stand of forest that makes sense to do it just on the edge of the boundary, because it would fracture the forest up if we didn't, if I can say it that way. So the intent really then is that CRIP is for within the city boundary, and the Forest Enhancement Society is for all of that section outside of the city. Because, for example, the Silver Creek fire and the Glen Eden fire that we had, both of those came from outside of the city towards and into the city boundary. And that's one of the big dangers, is coming off the mountains down into the city. So they recognize still that in order to properly mitigate the issue of fire coming into the city, you need to have an area outside of the city done. You need to have a good swath done around the city as well. And that's, so it really hasn't changed anything, it's just that they've decided to draw these boundaries on city boundaries or reserve boundaries. And the funding amount for within the city is now $100,000 maximum, but 100% funded. And the amount outside of the city through the FES funding, there really isn't a limit on it, but it of course has to be kept reasonable as well. So we're competing with other communities right across the province for that funding. So.
And that FESBC funding piece, because we're talking about Crown land, mostly regional district land, is that 100% funded, or is that how they see it?
It is, unless if there's room there for them to ask if there's other funding coming in, or if any other programs are being used to help with that, or if there's in-kind contributions or whatnot. But in essence, it's 100% funded.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate you allowing me to ask those questions.
Councillor Lyson, did you have questions for our presenters?
Yeah, no, I have a question. So thanks for bringing this forward. As you know, I haven't really been a vocal supporter of this because I think that there may be, I see how forest fires go and mega fires go, and I don't know if the thinning or this will work. But I think this is a good first step, as Councillor Jamieson has said. What do you think about community forests? Do you think that the community... Go ahead.
Okay. So community forests are becoming more popular in the province. And certainly Salmon Arm is probably in as good a position as any city for something like that. And if you're thinking about could a community forest be integrated with this type of fuel management, absolutely. There's no reason why it couldn't be. It's a process of, it takes time, quite a bit of time to get a community forest approved. But it's a way of managing the lands around a community that suits the community, that brings revenue to the community, and also develops opportunities for managing, in addition to timber, things like recreational trails, any other kind of recreational activities, any other kind of really use that the city might have for the surrounding areas. So often those community forests are managed for more than just timber.
Well, and this is my thought, because we're going hat in hand to the government for grants for essentially, what can you do with $100,000 in a forested area like us? Let's be honest, it's not a lot. But where do we go from here, right? Because if this is it, if this is our be all end all, then what are we doing?
So but the $100,000 is just for in the city, and that's $100,000 per year. Okay? Yeah. The type of funding that you could expect for something like the Forest Enhancement Society would be much, much larger than that. Could be tenfold per year.
Per year, if that funding goes forward. And so I'm not taking anything away from what we're doing.
And we're proposing a 3-year package to them.
Yeah, but what's our big picture? What's our plan? What are we going to do with it? Like, sure, let's go and do this, and this is a great initiative, in my opinion. But are we going to leverage this into something bigger? Are we going to do something with this? Are we going to build this relationship and work together and make something happen here positive that we all benefit from? Are we going to leverage that into something like a community forest so we're not reliant if a government changes and they cut off this funding, or they change it from Swippy to Chris, and then are we going to do something that is going to make this make sense in the long term so we have a revenue stream and we have a way to manage cooperatively the crown lands around both of our areas? So is that something that you guys are looking at, big picture?
Well, we approached city, I think, quite a few years ago on partnering up for a community forest, and we got turned down. And there are examples out there. Splatine just signed one with the Lumbee city of Lumbee.
Yeah.
And if you want, you could probably get a hold of them and get some information from them as to how they're developed, and that way you have first-hand information. But I think with the other program that the fuel reduction, I think we should be really thinking of making that big effort towards the safety of our community and our people. That should come first and foremost. And we make that big effort to step forward to help our people, through the safety of the fires, the potential fires, the hazards that are out there. If we got to make that first step into doing this, like I said, for the safety of our communities and our members of their property and things like that. Yeah, and that's what my strong belief is belief in my people and the safety of them.
So also, in talking with FESBC, their feelings are is that this FES funding's here for quite a while. The previous funding, the SWIPE funding, which included that section outside of the city, has been around about 12 years already. And since that time, we've had 2 years in a row of record fire threats around the city, in British Columbia, everywhere. And we can all attest to that from the smoke and whatnot. So if anything, it appears that this is going forward for the longer term, not a quick thing, because we all know, we watch the news all over the world, these problems are happening, and the predictions are that they're going to continue to grow and to get worse. So that's the only assurance we really have at this time, but the province themselves, or FESBC, is saying, we really think this is going to be around for a while.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thanks, Your Worship, and I've had lots of time here. I just want to say that these are really important conversations, and we've got one right now head down on a really short-term application here for funding. But the spin-off from this, the impact of this, the relationship building from this, is going to lead to those conversations of community forests and value addedness for both communities here. The clock is ticking, and I do want to do a shout out to Nisconlith, to Mr. Smith, and to staff for getting us to this point here. There's more discussion to have as we talk about what this government-to-government relationship is going to look like, but the intent here, the high-level intent, is a commitment to working together. So I'd encourage us to support this.
Anything further from council? Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to make just a couple of comments. First of all, totally agree with Councillor Lavery. And, I talked a little bit about the report, the provincial report that came out. And we all know what the report said was, we have to become proactive, because we budgeted, the province budgeted 50 million to fight fires, and it was 500 million or 600 million. So that is a pile of money. And as Terry said, the climate's changing. It's not going to get better. So we have to try something different. So when you think about that big pile of money, using it proactively, having us have the ability to apply, I think it's definitely the right way to go. So I totally support the motion, and thank you too, and Councillor Lavery, for your work.
I'd like to thank you too for putting us ahead on the agenda.
I just want to thank both of you as well, and we'll vote here in a minute if you want to wait. We did sign the communications agreement, and I think that's wonderful, and this whole start of us working together is extremely important, so I'm really pleased to be moving this forward. So with no other speakers, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you so much. So now we can go back again. Are we on number 14? Is that where we are? No. 11 point, okay, yeah. I'm trying to go through it faster. Okay. So we were at 11.1, is that correct? Administrator?
Yes, we're at staff report, Your Worship, 11.1, which is 10th Avenue Northeast culvert replacement. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Lavery, second by Councillor Eliason, that the 2018 budget be amended to reflect additional funding for the 10th Avenue Northwest Culvert Project in the amount of $66,000 reallocated from the following projects: 8th Avenue Road Widening, $28,000, 9th Avenue and 30th Street Intersection Design, $16,000, and Drainage Reserve, $22,000.
Okay. Director of Engineering?
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could get my screen on, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty, but if I could, number 5, Carl. Yes, we do, if we can get it on the screen. So, Your Worship, in regards to this report, we've got a couple of budget amendments coming forward here. If you look at the screen, this shows you the location of the 10th Avenue culvert, and this was a priority 1 stormwater project. And with the recent flooding and freshet problems that we've had, it created some other issues with this culvert. Now, this is the design drawing, so it gives you the location, 10th, up in Glen Eden. And these are just some photos taken from Landmark Solution, who was the contractor of the extent of the project. Councillor Jameson and I had the opportunity to go up there while it was being constructed. So essentially what's happening, you can see the culvert here, it goes from a 1,200 millimeter culvert to a 3 meter culvert, so a very large culvert. It's set properly. And the reason I'm showing these photos is the basis of this amendment. There was an extensive amount of geotechnical work done on this project. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bedrock in that area, and we had to do a lot more import of soil. Some of the soils that they took out could not be reused, and we're talking, almost 1,000 truckloads of material going out and 1,000 truckloads coming back in. So just by showing these pictures, hopefully it gives you some idea of the magnitude of the project. As I mentioned, Councillor Jameson and I were out to see that project and specifically. So it's reset this culvert. You can see the head wall here. Very important project for the city. Very large, very expensive project. So out of a $500,000 project, we're looking to amend by $66,000.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have any questions? Okay, seeing no questions, comments, I think we have to do it. But I don't see any questions or comments, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
Your Worship, the next item, 11.2, is Taxiway Charlie Optional Design Award. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Flynn, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that the 2018 budget be amended to reflect additional funding for the Shuswap Regional Airport Taxiway Charlie Design Project in the amount of $35,000 funded from the Community Works Fund, and that the city's purchasing policy be waived to authorize the sole sourcing of same to WSP Canada Inc., and that council award the additional engineering services contract for the design project to WSP Canada Inc. in accordance with the terms of their proposal for an estimated cost of $32,209 plus taxes.
Engineering, did you have any comments?
Your Worship, thank you. So this is another project that is underway. This is the design for Taxiway Charlie, and this is Taxiway Charlie on the top of the screen. It parallels the existing runway. One of the things that we had envisioned was that we would have, with this design, have these 2 parallel taxi lanes designed, and with the grant money, which is the total project's worth 1.4 million, or sorry, 1.04 million. Yeah. What we'd like to do is have these 2 taxi lanes designed so that we can facilitate the development of these hangar pads. And that's going to be, it was an optional item in the design, and it's $32,000. So now that we've reviewed the design work, we would like to proceed with that. So keeping the project moving forward.
Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Worship. I should actually probably wait to let the councillors who know more about this speak to it if they want. I'll wait.
Okay. Councillor Harrison, would you like to speak to it?
Sure. I'm also happy to answer any questions if Councillor Flynn has them, but we're chipping away at what needs to be done out at the airport, and following the master plan that was made for the development there. The Director of Engineering pointed out Taxiway Charlie, the blue that's not there now, that we want to build. If you could just put the hand on where the taxiway is now, Taxiway Bravo is there right now, and you can see it's diagonal, does not run parallel to the runway. And of course, we have limited space out there, so the problem with that taxiway is it takes up space that we need. And it's also not very practical. So we want to put taxiway Charlie in there parallel, which is going to allow us to put the yellow hangers there. And as was described, we need the little bit of extra money for those in between the hangers. So that's, in a nutshell, basically what we're asking.
Okay, thank you. And then Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I will vote in favor. I think the plans that have been done, the movement forward on those plans, some of the funding we've received from feds, province is all positive. I guess my one comment, and I can bring this up now, but if we are building more places to store planes, I find it extremely ironic that I pay probably double to moor my boat at our wharf for 6 months or 5 months than what somebody does for annual moorage, not moorage, annual storage at the hangars at the airport. I think we need to revisit a financial plan and reprice those leases because I think they're way too low. So I hope that's part of the overall plan. It is kind of shocking that you pay more for a boat for a short season than you do for a whole year at an airport. So I think we need to revisit that.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, good question. Councillor Flynn, we have a place for your boat up at the airport.
And I can get in and out without hitting mud?
No, we are, yeah, I think you're dead on. We are certainly reviewing the costs of hangar rentals, and we've talked to the Airport Commission about that, and they also recognize that that needs to be done. And so we'll bring that information back to you, but the expectation is that certainly the rental costs will go up. And so it's just a matter of finding out what is fair, affordable, and reasonable.
That's great news.
Councillor Eliason?
I'd like to thank Councillor Harrison for his work as the chairperson of the airport, and I'd like to thank staff for bringing forward this report. It's been a long time coming, but it's good to see us getting some money, and I will fully support any short-term borrowing that we have to do to make these projects happen because they started in 2006.
Sometimes it takes us a long time, but we get her done. Anyway, I appreciate this. I think this is a pretty exciting step forward for the airport. So thank you for all your work on it, and thank you to staff as well. So seeing no further speakers, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. Administrator?
Your Worship, that brings us to council statements.
All righty. So do we have any council statements at this time? Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. I wanted to share with council that I went to the Shuswap Community Foundation annual community meeting. Enormously proud of the group and our contribution to it. We gave away $142,000 this year in grants to groups in Salmon and the Shuswap. Delighted with the BC housing turnout that was held last Monday. Those of you who were here knew that the gallery was full to the rafters with developers, social agencies, communities of faith, members of the public, builders, realtors, really quite an impressive turnout for a community of this size. I attended Shred Fest, the North Okanagan Crime Fighters fundraiser, where you can shred boxes. For $5 a banker's box, they'll shred all your document. A fantastic event. If they ever ask for permission again, I hope they receive it. And finally, I wanted to just say a sincere and heartfelt thank you to staff and all the volunteers for running such a great election. So, and that's it for me.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Cooper. Again, thanks to staff for the election, even though our election officer is just leaving here. But a great job. I also want to give a shout out to senior staff for their long and hard work on the underpass. I think I did mention in other locations, social media, but The role of council is to set direction, and the role of staff is to implement faithfully. You have done that. It's been a long and hard road. It's been a long and hard underpass, and there's a lot of work to be done on it still. But your direction, the amount of work that's gone on here is impressive. So thank you to you as well. And my final comment would be just for this table and for Debbie coming back, and for Sylvia, the LGLA convention is in January, 23rd or something. We can get the information on that, but the intent this year, as my understanding is, it's not just for newbies. It's they're going to have a whole section for returning elected officials as well, and be well worth the time to slot that off to have that professional development. So I'll pass the exact dates on when we get them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn.
I know Councillor Jameson quite often uses a letter, or was it Councillor Wallace-Richmond, or is it both of you? But I'm going to use a number, 63%. Councillor Lavery mentioned it, but staff, some groups in the community did an amazing job to get a yes that was much needed for the community. And I don't think the work staff did in the forums or the educational sessions, Carl, your presentation, can't say enough about how good it was and how persuasive it was, and the facts that you guys put together and the information that you put together for the community. To me, I did not expect 63-37. I probably expected closer to 52-48. So although it's not a 90%, it's a pretty darn good number, and I reiterate the comments that staff did so much work to make that happen. Good news is the bulk of the work is now going to start at some point in the future. So thank you for what you did, and thank you for the election work and the volunteers and staff that did all of that work. And thank you to everybody here at this table. I know we're going to have, those of us that are going to be back are going to have a chance to say things in a couple weeks, I believe November 5th. But Mayor Cooper and Councillor Jameson, you will be missed. It's been a great 4 years, and thank you to staff for all your support.
Thank you. Is there anything further? Just for myself on the underpass too, I'm excited that it passed, that all the work that you have, that staff has done, has been recognized and was very persuasive. And so just, you guys did a great job, but you do a great job on everything. So we can never say enough thank yous to our staff. You do a wonderful job. So thank you very much. Seeing no further speakers, Administrator?
Your Worship, that brings us all the way down to question and answer period, which is back on the agenda now.
Oh, okay. Anybody have any questions? We don't have any answers, but you can ask. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Seeing none?
So we recess until 7 p.m., Your Worship.
Thank you.
Did anybody that's at the council table give us these, or did Fortis actually send them for us? I'm gonna go give mine to our favorite fan and see if she wants them.
I wanted us to do it together because I'm